because then I was like, oh, I want to talk about everything now other than the movies we're supposed to talk about, which is what always
Yeah.
happens. Hello, and welcome to Reel Film Snobs. I am pleased to be joined once again on the show by my regular, I'm going to call you my regular guest host now, Ernie. Ernie Quiroz. Welcome to the show, Ernie.
Hey, thanks for having me as always.
Yeah, so Ernie and I are back to talk about hidden gems of 2022. So we have plumbed the depths of the film cinematic universe to find some hidden gems for you. Ernie, of course, sees like a bazillion movies a year, me less so. But we see a lot of films that really just have gone under the radar this year, haven't gotten much critical acclaim even or much attention, not a ton of write-ups, but are still great films that are available on streaming for you to check out. So I'm going to start us off with our first film, which was one of my picks, and it is a thriller called Catch the Fair One. It's about a Native American boxer who embarks on quite the fight when she goes in search of her missing sister. The main role is played by Kali Reese, and I'm apologize if I'm butchering her name, who is actually a boxer in real life and helped co-write the story, which is based on, the story itself is fictional, but the movie is based on a real fact that Native American women go missing and are kidnapped or are taken into like the sex trade in a very high numbers compared to the rest of the population. And it's become really something of an epidemic of proportions. Like she wrote this story to bring attention to this issue, but rather it coming off as like a social issues movie. What I really liked about this is it's a really tense thriller. And because she's a boxer and like a really, really tough woman, she gets to do a lot of, there's quite a bit of action in it as well. So it's definitely not a movie that will make you bored, despite the fact it's highlighting a really important topic. Curious to hear what you thought of this one, Ernie.
Yeah, no, I really like this one. It was, it's a good revenge thriller, sort of a good genre, it takes that genre form, but like you said, it has this deeper social meaning. I've seen a number of documentaries about the missing murdered Indigenous women uh phenomenon, for lack of a better word. And sadly a lot of people just don't know about that. It's just insane, how many Indigenous women, because no one cares. They're seen as disposable, and that's why these men target these women. Or there's, they're weird tribal, is it the tribal police, is it FBI, is it local police? There's no,
The
no
lines of
one
authority about who should investigate. And so
authorities on, exactly, and no one does, no one cares, just no one cares. So I think it does a good job of sort of using this revenge thriller story of the sister going after, trying to find her other sister and avenge her death. It does that in a really great way. The filmmaker, I do have to say, the filmmaker, he made this great film called Manos Sucios. I don't know if you've seen that or if people want to check that out. It's a Colombian film that came out about 3 or 4 years ago. So,
oh,
and that also has sort of a thriller aspect, and it deals with narco trafficking in South America. Manos Sucios.
Sucios. Okay. Is that, do you know if it's available anywhere or not sure about that one?
I don't know if it's widely available, but I do know that at the very least, I think you can probably rent it from Amazon.
Yeah, that's great to know because I wasn't aware if the director had made anything else. I wondered if this was a directorial debut. Yeah, I just love that it's, a story we've kind of seen before in a way, missing sister must try to find her, but it takes on some different proportions as she gets further and further into this underworld of these people in this really kind of slimy business. And she herself, the main character, has a lot of her own demons. She's, overcoming a drug addiction. We get the sense that she's been through a lot herself, and finding her sister is one of the ways she's trying to save herself, I feel, as well. So
And like you said, the lead actress not being a professional actress of being this MMA fighter, I think sort of lends some weight to the film, and like you said, sort of inspired by things that she's read about and gone through. I think just adds a whole layer of depth to the film.
And probably all those tats are real, unlike what we see in actors and films these days. So, yeah, and I thought she was actually really terrific for a non-professional actor. I thought she did a really great job inhabiting the role. Of course, it's close to her, but I was thinking about the Soderbergh movie he did years ago that also starred an MMA fighter in the lead role, and there were some criticisms of her acting, but that the action sequences are really good. But I think the actress in this film does really good, even during the more dramatic moments that don't require a lot of action per se. So yeah,
For sure.
so
Yeah.
definitely recommend this one. It's on Hulu. I give it 4 stars actually. I really enjoyed this one, and I really think people should seek it out.
Yeah. Do we do 4 stars or 5 stars? I would give
Four
it
stars on this show. Yeah, 4 stars.
I would say yeah, 3.5. 3.5
Okay, great.
stars.
Thank you.
So
Okay.
my first pick is Apollo 10 and a half by Richard Linklater, who, I think, he's been making films for 30 years. It's crazy. And, obviously some seminal films in the whole indie film sort of renaissance in the 90s. And I don't know, he never gets mentioned. He's not a big flashy filmmaker like a Tarantino or Nolan or anything like that. So, and then, Apollo 10 and a half, I think, just sort of got dumped onto Netflix. I don't know if it played any festivals at all. It just sort of appeared on
Yeah.
Netflix. And I
And
think
they
a
didn't
lot of
promote it at
people,
all. They never do, but
yeah,
they didn't. Yeah.
it's one of those cases of where, a streamer sort of gobbles up this film just to be dumped. The story itself is is a pretty kind of a silly little conceit that the narrator is reminiscing about his childhood, and that this is in the 70s in Houston, in the sort of heady days of NASA. And the story itself is kind of a silly story, and it's mostly a nostalgia trip, is what it is. So the story is the NASA people made the Apollo capsule too small, and that they have to send a kid to the moon. They can't send a full-grown man, and so he's sort of supposedly recounting his life of being a NASA astronaut. But really, it's just a nostalgia trip. And I think any kid from the 70s or 80s is just, there's going to be so many things that bring back a flood of memories. But I think even if you're younger and maybe you don't have that connection to the 70s, I think there's things of childhood and family and growing up that sort of remain universal. This is a rotoscoped film, so it's the animation that he did in Waking Life and Scanner Darkly, and sort of like those movies, it gives sort of a trippy sort of stream of consciousness feel to it, because that's what this film is. It's like I said, it's this sort of silly story that there's maybe like 10 minutes of screen time on that story. It's essentially sort of this free form nostalgia trip. So yeah, I think if you're a fan of Linklater, or maybe if it's animation, I think you're really going to like it. Or a child of the 70s or 80s. So I don't know,
Yeah,
Angela,
or
where
60s, I would say too. There's actually
or the
some,
60s? Yeah.
yeah, I feel like there's some 60s references in there quite a bit actually. And actually someone I know who is of that 60s generation recognized a lot of things in the film. So I would say going back to 60s, childhood 60s or 70s would definitely enjoy this film. That I'm too young myself. No. But I enjoyed aspects of this. Richard Linklater, it's interesting because I feel like you said he's often underrated. The film he's done in the last few years that's gotten the most attention, Boyhood, was actually one of my least favorite of his films. So I always seem to be at odds with the critics on some of his films, whereas other ones he's done I thought were just masterful. A Scar Darkly, I think, is a masterpiece, and I don't think he got anywhere near the attention for it. Like in that film, he uses that rotoscope method here, which is basically animating over real people. And I think it's pretty effective here, especially to give that feeling of kind of like, oh, we're looking at another time. Waking Life was also very philosophical and dreamy. Obviously, Scanner Darkly was because it was sci fi and it was people like, tripping out big time on drugs, so it worked really well for that. This film is quite a bit more innocent than those two movies, but I think the rotoscope method works really well. I think a lot of folks, will just appreciate the creativity that he's bringing to this. And again, I know that that method of filming is not cheap, so it's just baffling to me that this just got dumped on Netflix with like no fanfare. Major director who's been nominated for Oscars for movies like Boyhood, and they just dumped his latest movie on there. I shouldn't be surprised anymore, but
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know where the Oscars landed on eligibility for animation, and there was some controversy that they were saying it wasn't eligible. They don't consider it animation, but then I think they maybe kind of relented and realized that yes, this is animation. So I don't know if I mean, who
I don't
knows?
know why they wouldn't because oh man, I'm forgetting the film last year. It was in my top 10 that went back and forth between like documentary footage and animation, and they nominated that
Oh,
for documentary and animated. And that seemed in some ways maybe even less animated than this movie. I mean, there's animation on every frame. It's just
yeah,
animating over people. So I don't know why it wouldn't be animated
yeah,
per se, but
yeah,
yeah, I don't know if it will because there's so many other contenders and animation get nominated, but it would help for
yeah.
the film a lot if it did.
Yeah. And then one last thing, I did not know this until after the fact that Jack Black is the one that does the narration, and it's not, it's not the over the top sort of in your face Jack Black.
Oh no, no, I didn't. You wouldn't know it unless I saw it in the
Yeah.
credits. I was like, oh, that's who that was. But he's so like contained that you never know it's Jack Black. He's not doing any of this crazy rock and
Yeah.
rollness in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So my
Great.
next film is a documentary called The Territory. This is on Nat Geo. Alex Pritz, I believe, is the director, and Darren Aronofsky.
Executive
Produced
produced.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which I thought was kind of weird. So this is I love films from Latin America, from South America, and I love films about um social issues, indigenous tribes. So this is about a tribe in the Amazon who is basically fighting against development, fighting against um, land developers, and it primarily focuses on this one tribe. I'll forget the name, and I would butcher the name. But the young sort of tribal leader that is fighting against developers, and what really struck me is that this is a tribe that has, for the most part, remained closed off from the modern world. They still hunt with bow and arrows. They still, live in the trees. They for a very traditional way of life. And yet this young tribal leader, I mean, he's probably like in his 20s or whatever, he still knows about social media and he understands the power of social media to get his message out. So here they are. On the one hand, they're fighting against these developers with literal bows and arrows, but then also going on like Twitter and TikTok, and he knows that this is also a weapon that he can use. So I just found it, I just found it fascinating, and I know could maybe be depressing, but for me, I found it uplifting. Of like, here's this guy, literally standing up against these incredible odds to fight for his way of life and fight for the land.
Yeah, and they're helped in the film by an environmental activist who's outside the tribe, but helps them with some of those tools. Like we see her at the beginning setting up some drones, which at first, your reaction is like, oh, a drone, but it's actually helpful in their case because the drone can show them how far the
Mhm.
homesteaders or depending on what you want to call them, are invading their land. I think yeah, it was very emotional for me when I watched this because it was just awful to see the devastation of the rainforest and the fact that I feel like this was not covered at all in the popular media, that this had increased by 60% over the last few years, which is also leading to our worldwide climate because the rainforest is so important to the entire globe, which they talk about, and contributes to all of our carbon emissions. And so this actually made climate change worse in the last few years. So what I loved about the film, and I do recommend this one highly, is that it's not taken from that outsider perspective. The tribe is very involved in the film, and you mentioned the tribal leader, but the tribe themselves, you show them taking initiative. They're leading the way. It's not some outside group coming in to like save them. they're leading the cause. They're out there filming themselves and showing what's happening to their land because they know they're not getting any support from their government. The previous government, the president Bolsonaro, outright said, let's burn all indigenous villages, let's get rid of them, let's get rid of the rainforest. So he just basically, even though there was still treaties on that they weren't allowed to go into their land, it was just ignored. And so we see these different farmers and different groups coming in and just burning the trees and chopping them down wholesale. And it's just awful to see as someone who I mean, I consider myself an environmentalist, but not just that. All those animals, all those potential future medical cures, all those things just going up in smoke for some short-sighted monetary gain. And so I think that the movie is really important to see. I'm really glad to see this. This actually at least is available pretty easily to watch, as you mentioned, National Geographic. So it's available on Disney and on Hulu. All the Disney services carry National Geographic content. So that's really nice that it at least has some distribution that way.
Yeah, and then I'm seeing it's getting some pretty good Oscar buzz. I think it's going to be probably in the five nominees, and so hopefully that'll sort of bring a little more
More
attention to the
attention.
film.
Yeah, because I felt totally, I mean, of course, we've known about the rainforests for years, but then there was a period where we thought, oh, they were kind of getting protected. But then apparently, when the last president of Brazil took over, it was just a wholesale, like, let's war on the Amazon for rainforest and the indigenous people again. And it was really sad to see, but also, yeah, like you said, empowering. So
Yeah,
that's a good
and
way
then
to look at it, Ernie.
like you said, a lot of yeah, a lot of rainforest documentaries you've seen are done from an outsider perspective, where they're done from sort of like the point of view of the U.S. or the developed world. We don't see sort of a ground level view of the people who are most affected. You know, we
Right.
haven't really heard their story. Um, and like I said, it's so, there's these big bulldozers and they're sabotaging them with like Stone Age technology, but then he goes on Twitter to like tweet about it, you know.
Hmm.
Uh, so because he knows that he can find it, he can win win public attention that way. Yeah.
Well, and showing visually. I mean, the one thing about the wholesale burning of the rainforest is they have these horrible, and that's what was making me very emotional. There's this shot on the drone where they go up above their land, the rainforest, which is lush and green, and then they show the land that's been just left. I mean, this isn't like development the way we even think about it here and there. This is just they raise everything, not a tree left, and then they bring cattle in, and the land that takes over from the cattle, it just becomes barren and just dried up and brown, and the ground is cracking right next to this beautiful green area. It's really visually, that having those drone shots actually makes a huge impact. The other thing I want to mention that the filmmaker did that I think was really important was he actually also films the farmers and the people that call themselves homesteaders. They very much modeled themselves after the Old West, which I thought was very interesting. They kept talking about Westerns, and they viewed themselves in this like, well, these people, they keep referring to the indigenous people, the tribes just sitting on the land, not doing anything with it. And so they're in their minds, they're just trying to, make something of the land. Of course, it's very short-sighted because we know within a few years it's going to look like that other
Yeah.
land does, where it's just completely dry and unproductive. But I do think that one farmer who they interviewed, he talked about like he's been working other people's land for all his life, and he just wanted, basically this is his only chance to get his own land by taking some of theirs. So
Mhm. Mhm.
I thought that was very interesting that they included that perspective. So good on Darren Aronofsky. He also produced one of last year's best documentaries, which is Some Kind of Heaven, about the villages in Florida.
Oh yeah, the Florida, the retired.
Yeah, he produced that one too. So I don't know what's going on with him producing all these great documentaries, but I'm all for it.
Hey,
So
it worked. Yeah, it works great. Yeah.
okay, we'll move on to our last film, which is another one of my picks, and it is Fire in the Mountains. This one is about a woman who she's a mother who's trying to save money to have a road built in her remote village. Every day she takes her son, who can't walk, up and down the mountain to his therapy. And so she's trying to get this road built to both help her son as well as help their business. But her husband, who is very religious and wants to give the money that she's been saving to a shaman, to do whatever with. And so I thought this movie was fascinating. I saw it on a couple of critics lists, which is why I even heard of it. And then I watched it and I just thought it was terrific. It gets so much into like these bigger issues of patriarchy, of course, because she's doing all this work. I mean, I have no idea what the other people in her household are doing all day, but she's doing all this work and just literally almost killing herself to get this one thing done. And every chance they get, her family, particularly her husband and son, but particularly her husband, undermines her. And she's in this society that, basically says that her husband should be able to do whatever he wants with their money, even if it's basically throw it away to give it to this religious leader who is kind of portrayed in the movie like he's probably, probably not a very nice character. So there, I actually thought there was some humorous parts of this movie, but then I had my parents watch it, and my mother told me she thought it was horrendously depressing. So what do I know? So I'm curious what you thought, Ernie.
Well, I think maybe that's our MO, Angela, is you and I, we like to
Horrendously
do
depressing.
yeah, nothing makes us happier than a depressing movie. And I hope, well, I mean, these are these are some heavy movies that we're talking about, but I hope people seek them out because they're all definitely worth watching. Yeah, no, I like, this is another film that it deals with tradition versus modernity. It deals with, science versus religion. It deals with a lot of those big issues. But does them in I think, yeah, the acting was great, the cinematography was beautiful. I mean, it's just such a well made story. um yeah, I saw it at a festival. I can't even remember, it felt like almost 2 years ago, and then yeah, it just kind of went nowhere. um
Yeah, and I get it. There's a lot of movies out there, but it just seems like a real. I was just surprised this one didn't get even more buzz because I just thought the performances were so great. Like you said, the cinematography and a female, I believe, Indian director. So we don't see a lot of
mhm.
that, and so I loved that as well. And it's definitely one I think people should seek out. It's on Canopy. Which for those of you who don't know, that's like a free streaming service, costs you nothing as long as you have a library card. So
It's like
if
the
you don't
free
have a library
criterion.
card, you do have to get a library card to get an
It's like
account.
the
But
free criterion. They have a lot of criterion stuff.
oh, a lot of Criterion, a lot of documentaries, a lot of art house films like this. Like I find so much stuff on Canopy that isn't available anywhere else. Basically, a lot of like newer foreign films, when they come out somewhere, they often come out on Canopy because it's like the library. It's the national library system, so it's like the kind of movies you would find in a library, basically. So a lot of documentaries, a lot of foreign films. So some really good stuff. And this one was one that was a big discovery for me because, like I said, I saw it on one critics list and I thought, I wonder what that's about. I've never even heard of this movie, and then watched it. And so you saw it at a film festival a couple of years ago, you said?
Well, I mean, I think this is early in 2022, so I mean, it feels like there was
Right.
it feels like ages ago. Yeah, in the film world, that might as well be like 2 or 3 years ago.
That's true. It's true. Yeah. And I was actually trying to look up the director while we were talking here. I was trying to see if she had done anything else because I thought that maybe this was a directorial debut, but I'm not 100% sure of that. So the director's name is Ajitpal Singh. And so it looks like she has maybe done, oh, it's a he. No, I thought it was a female director. Well, that shows you what I know. Okay, so just forget everything I just said, people. And it's a male director, but it's still a very feminist story. And it looks like maybe directed one other film before this one, but definitely one I would highly recommend. So I think, wow, we have like 4 minutes left. This has never happened before. How did we go so fast?
We were just so excited. I think we were
I
so
know we
excited
just
about all of the
rushed through
films,
those. Well,
and
I would
and
say
there's
out of the four we watched, gosh, which one would I recommend the most? Which one would you recommend the most, Ernie?
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, the three of the four are pretty heavy duty stuff, so maybe if you're not in the mood for something quite so heavy, Apollo 10 and a half is a real easy
A
watch.
lighter film, yeah.
Sort of a lighter one to get in. Catch the Fair one, I think, is it does get pretty intense at the end, but it's a genre thriller, and also pretty easy. Deals with some heavy topics, like we said. Maybe there's some violence at the end. Maybe people might get a little bit turned off by that, but it's violence for a reason. There's context for it. And the other two, maybe wait until you're sort of mentally in the space for those two.
For the darker films, yeah, I'd say, Fire in the Mountains, it's definitely on the dark side. It's probably in some ways not as dark as The Territory because that's real, but I feel like The Territory ultimately has a fairly redeeming, I think there's some positivity at the end, even if it's not a full like bow on the end. I mean, I never like movies like that anyway. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
anything
and
that
I
you've
think,
seen recently that's out in theaters right now that you want to recommend to people?
oh, you know what? I did just see Holy Spider last night. I've been trying to see that for a while, and I would definitely recommend that. And so I don't know, I think it's just now sort of hitting theaters here. I'm in Phoenix for people who don't know. So I don't know, Phoenix, sometimes we get
Hasn't
stuff
made its way
early.
to Oregon yet, unfortunately, but I've been hearing a lot about Holy Spider. Is it a it's a Iranian film?
Iranian film, yeah, and it's
Hmm.
sort of also sort of takes a genre approach to an important topic. So it's about this. It's actually based on a lot of true life stories. It's about this journalist, this female journalist, who is trying to help catch a serial killer. The serial killer is targeting prostitutes, targeting the women on the street, because he sees it as sort of his uh, cleansing, a sort of a fatwa against sexual and moral
Mm.
depravity. So he's targeting these women, these prostitutes, these whores that are corrupting society. So he's seen as this is something that he's doing good. And obviously that's happening right now in the Middle East and Iran. Women's rights are being taken away, and especially with sexuality. And so it deals with these important topics in sort of this genre, sort of police procedural sort of context.
Oh, interesting. And yeah, that I've been hearing a lot about it, a lot of buzz about that one. So that will be interesting to see if that's up for, is that shortlisted as far as you know for like foreign
That is
language film?
shortlisted,
Mhm.
and then yeah, we'll see if it gets a nomination here in I think in a week.
Competitive year for the best. I know it's not called foreign language film. I think it's international feature now.
Yeah.
Competitive year for that category, I think, because there's so many great films in that category. The film I saw the most recently in the theaters was The Whale by Darren Aronofsky, ironically, because we were talking about him producing, executive producing The Territory. So I saw The Whale with Brendan Fraser this last weekend. Did you see that yet?
I did. I saw that at Toronto. I have a little mixed feelings about it. I mostly liked it, but we don't have enough time. But
Yeah, no, we don't have enough time for that one, but it's definitely one. It's been a very surprise indie hit, and that's the part that really shocks me because no way, based on everything I know about, there's so few indie hits right now. It's so shocking to me that that movie has been fairly a hit because it's like the exact kind of movie that usually isn't. It's in one room, essentially, like one location, small cast, based on a play. I mean, usually all those things are like the kiss of death. So, I find that fascinating. Conversation for another day. So,
I am on
anyway,
board for the Renaissance, though. I'm definitely on board for that.
is that what they're calling it? The Renaissance? For
Yes.
Brendan Fraser. Okay, I
Yeah.
did not know. I'm out of the loop on that. That's great. Okay, well, thank you, Ernie. It was great to have you on the show again. As always, you can check out our reviews on our website, reelfilmsnobs.com. And of course, on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button so you're notified when we have new episodes. We're on CC Media, Scan TV, and Silverton Corvallis Access Media, KMUZ Radio, KMWV. Thank you very much. Have a great day and great movies.